I think all I need to say is wow. Welcome all. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. I'm Bryna Blum, Chair of Worship here at UUCOD, and your worship associate this morning, delighted to be standing here beside the Reverend Barbara Fast, who led this congregation with amazing grace for 3 years and taught us the meaning of shared ministry, of which you will experience a great example today. Today's service is our dedication of the habitat. You might feel awkward being in a church service. Please don't worry. Many of the members here, myself included, are not comfortable with the word church and span the gamut from Buddhist to Jewish to atheist to Wiccan. This service is about our connection to the land, which to Unitarians is spiritual. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. As we begin today's celebration, and that is what it is, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded lands of the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla people. And we commit to grow in our understanding and relationship with this land and with the people who inhabited it and nurtured it before our arrival. In this congregation, where we strive to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person, you are welcome, no matter your sexual orientation or gender identity, your age, your size, whether you're rich or poor. We welcome people of all races, religions, and cultures. We welcome you wherever you come from and whoever you love. We welcome all those who will learn and grow with us as we commit together to embrace the rich and beautiful diversity of the world. Our goal here is to build a community centered in justice, in compassion, and most importantly, in love. We are glad you're with us this morning, whether you're here in the sanctuary or at home. We are grateful for your presence. We'd like to take a moment now to greet newcomers and visitors. So if you're here for the first time or a visitor for this very special event and are comfortable doing so, please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you. On behalf of Reverend Ian, who is out on the waters, thank you for being with us today. The dedication starts here and ends at the Labyrinth, after which we invite you to join in the Exhibitor Fair, garden tours, and refreshments. The Exhibitor Fair features 9 conservation organizations in the Valley with great information on how you can create habitat in your backyard, and 2 are even selling plants. And now join me as we ring the Tibetan bowl and listen to Joel as he plays our music for centering.
Good morning. What a wonderful day, and how wonderful that we are striving to make it a bit more wonderful world for all the creatures. Welcome. Bryna and I both hail from New York, and one of the things we loved about New York were the hot dogs. So, Bryna, what did the Zen monk say to the hot dog vendor?
Reverend Barbara, I don't know.
Can you make me one with everything? You never heard that? Thank you. This morning, like every morning, the sun rose, and we did not have to do anything but be willing to greet the day just as we are, however we are. So, how are you? Thank you. Tingling with hope, perhaps, many of us. Or maybe some of us dragging some fear. Eager for challenge and adventure, or needing a little rest, consolation. Journeying through loss. Celebrating a vision of completeness with community. We all have our reasons for being here, and each of us has probably multiple reasons for being here. So let's take a breath. Just then, millennia of molecules from the dust of dead stars entered us and were expelled and shared in this room. The Zen monk, she did not have to ask. She is already, always has been, always will be, one with everything. Evolved dust of dead stars is every part and particle of us, every creature, everything. Stardust. And we are totally interdependent, interconnected, part of, not apart from. And the truth is, we are totally dependent on this world for everything that keeps us and everything alive. The interdependent web of all existence. Take a breath. Now, try to hold it. See how long that lasts. Total dependence on this world. And when we are willing to realize that, to realize life, everything becomes sacred ground. Inside, outside, sacred ground. I'm the Reverend Barbara Fast, retired from serving this wonderful congregation. The Reverend Ian Riddell, settled minister here, is away on a brief and well-deserved holiday. He'll be with us next Sunday, and he'll be with us through the miracle of video later in the service. I share this joyful privilege to welcome you, UCOD regulars, newcomers, dedicated Sacred Ground volunteers, supporters, desert environmental educators, enthusiasts, experts, leaders from our UU region, all honored guests. Now, a man dedicated to learning, understanding, conserving, one who's held, shared, encouraged, worked, carried a vision to realize the possibilities of the sacred grounds here and this day's dedication service. I give you Rod Belshie.
What a beautiful flower. We owe everything about sacred grounds and what we're going to see today to that little gem. In 2017, Bruce Elwood walked me out and showed me that pretty flower growing out behind the building. Those of you who have taken the classes should know that's the endangered Coachella Valley milkvetch. That's a listed species, happily growing on our land. That made me kind of think. That made me think of this little thing. If you're curious, then you want to learn. So, next slide. The next year, there was a class, inaugural class by Dr. Cameron Barrows on California naturalists. We're jumping forward to the hymn. I know the AFE folks really love me and aren't trying to take me off the stage, but it could happen, and I'd be good with that. So the next year, I joined the California naturalist class. Being new to the desert, I didn't know anything about it, but if you're curious, then you try to learn. Turns out there's a lot to know about it. In 2019, I started imagining, well, what else could we do with this land around the church? We have 3.5 acres here. And I'll bet we could make something of it. So we started with a dream. We started with figuring out what we might do. Next slide. And we started collecting interested people. I'd walk them around the grounds and kind of say, imagine, if you will. And more people showed up. Peter and Hiroshi showed up. A number of folks started getting interested in what we might be able to do here. And it kind of peaked in a number of activities. We started pulling out the invasive species. We had tons of Sahara mustard. We had fountain grass that was planted on purpose. We had chismus, we had all kinds of stuff. We had tons and tons of construction debris in the yards that we started hauling away. And by 2020, it was getting to be kind of exciting. We had weed pull parties. We had all kinds of activities going on, and it leads to, on March 22nd, if I recall right, was going to be the absolute major kickoff, kind of like what you're doing right now. And I hear the snickers. March 20, we closed the building for COVID. And that was kind of the end of Sacred Grounds. We all instead started circling the wagons and how do we stay together as a congregation. Everybody shifted to new tasks. We put in AV systems. We started streaming. Might recall Vicki and Rev B actually delivered a service 2 days after we closed the building. It was her holding her iPhone and her talking into it and doing the best we could possibly do. So we focused towards keep the church together. And it appears it worked. Next slide. We held lots of sessions in that January. We had so-called dreaming sessions where we said the only rule is everything's possible and there aren't enough ideas yet. There's never too many ideas. And we really build up a lot. Next slide. This is what the grounds looked like as we started. You're going to see a different picture in a couple of minutes. But this is a bare piece of sand down by the Labyrinth. Some of you took a peek already. We hauled out all the debris. We tended the bushes. You might look at those insilia and say they're a little tired. Wasn't real happy looking down there. By 2023, which is actually now last year, it turns out, a coalition started again. More people got excited. We ended up with about 60 people subscribing to an email list of, it's time, let's go do something. And in October, we finished a patio expansion. In December, we blessed and celebrated the celebration garden that's off the side here. And the one that's really for habitat and the one that for most of you conservation-minded folks have come for today is the dedication of the habitat. It's a desert canyon habitat. So it starts, next slide. Yay! It starts with bringing in boulders. I was at a talk once where you two were talking, and Dr. Cameron was asked, how many rocks, how many boulders should we put in your yard? You remember your answer? More. Pick your number, add one. Add another one. So this is the first of 5 tons, or this is the first 5 tons. We brought in 25 tons of boulders by dump truck into 7,500 square feet. And then since then, Dave and Sue have probably brought in another 10 in their pickup truck. Next slide. And the next we have Scott Parks comes in with a bulldozer and starts trying to place them and make the mounds and build up the grounds. as best we possibly can, skillfully placing the boulders. Next one. And surprisingly, if you look, he's able to keep most of the plants. We're moving 25 tons of boulders and God knows how much sand around, and most of it's still there. Within a couple of weeks of adding the boulders, 2 new species of lizards moved in. We didn't get the garden done before it started becoming habitat. So how cool is that? Next slide. So over the next few weeks, work parties started in, and we added 104 plants, I think was the final total, into the garden. As you walk around with the tours today, look close. A lot of them are this big, but they're happy and they're healthy and they're wonderful. Huge kudos to Katie, thank you for helping get the plants, and Sue and a number of other people. And then we began the process of planting them over the next few days. Next slide. Dave will give you a little talk when we get down to the Labyrinth. This is Dave and Sue. Dave put in more hours than anybody on the garden. So when you see him down there, it's proper to just sort of bow a little bit. It's okay. It won't go to his head. Well, it might, and it's fine. And then the next slide. So you might recall the bare sand. This is the garden. And I don't know about you, but in the back of my mind, this "Isn't she lovely" shows up. So please join me. Next is going to be our opening hymn, which is "Morning Has Broken." And after that, we'll go immediately into the video of Reverend Ian, our minister. So please rise in either body or spirit as Mackenzie Zahn leads us in our hymn. The words are going to be on the screen in front of you.
Good morning, friends. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I am definitely with you in spirit on this day of celebration, this day of dedication, this day of recommitment. It is a celebration. It's a celebration of long-laid plans, hard work done, inspiration and hope and sweat, and getting down in the dirt. It is a celebration of the triumph of great project. It is also a celebration of our deepest Unitarian Universalist values, that value of interdependence which we hold so dearly, the understanding that we have that we don't just live on the land, that we are part of the environment, we are part of the culture, we are part of the world of the plants and the trees and the bugs and the bees and the animals and the creatures that live where we live. We understand that we have an impact on those cultures, we have an impact on that land, and so we choose today to celebrate that we are creating grounds that fit with where we are, grounds that show our commitment, grounds that live out our values of interdependence, live our value of justice for the creatures and for the planet, for our environment. We are dedicated to making the world a better place. And that doesn't mean just for people. It means for the environment in which those people live. It means for the animals and the plants and all of the life that surrounds us. And so we are so grateful today that we can dedicate this new garden, which is the beginning of a larger project, to live more sustainably, more reasonably, more connectedly with the land that we inhabit, the land that we nurture here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. And we are honoring and celebrating our value of justice today as well. We understand that we who have privilege, we who have the means, we who have the resources, are called to build a better world for those around us, to build a better world for our neighbors, to build a better world for our society, and to build a better world for our environment that we are such a deep part of. Justice is not just about the rights of people. It is about the rights and the safety and the thriving of all of life. We are called to that kind of justice, the justice that says that we are to work to build a world where all of the creatures of the world, human and non-human, can thrive and live together in health and in safety. And we hope that the creation of these sacred grounds, the nurturing of these sacred grounds today and over time, will commit ourselves to that nurturing, to that possibility of justice for all, justice for the interdependence of all, so that all creatures, all animals, all plants, all humans, all of us can live together in harmony, can live together in support, and can thrive and find a place where we belong. My friends, I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but know that I am celebrating with you, and I look forward to so much more celebration in the days and months and years to come. Congratulations to our Sacred Grounds team. Thank you for all the work that you have done and are doing, and so much gratitude to all of you who helped make today possible. I am so grateful that we are living our values out in this profound and public and meaningful and loving way. Thank you. Will you please join me in the unison aspiration as we light the chalice of this beloved community? May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
Spencer will come up. And please join with me for the lighting of the Biopoc candles. We light these candles in solidarity with the Black, Indigenous, and the God Father as we journey together toward spiritual wholeness. May we, as a beloved community, work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all will prevail.
Walking words. Evelyn Kane perceived her encounters with the waves of the super bloom, the unfamiliar desert plants, as magical encounters. And to honor her encounters, she painted and composed poems. Evelyn died December 30th, 2022, just over a year ago. These are a few of her encounters. She wrote, "I never intended to write poetry, but walking brought the words into my head." And Celia, golden wonder, you stretch your golden aureoles outside my window above a mound of silvery leaves and scatter amber glass on the ground. Your little sons seek their big sister while I bask in your glow. Desert trumpet, What a blast. You know what? You don't look anything like a trumpet. Trombone, maybe. I doubt the angel Moroni, guardian of the golden plates, perched on Mormon temples, could call out to the people with the likes of you. You spring up from cracked, parched mud, where little else grows, your bulging stems arising from a circlet of geranium leaves. Say, could your dainty flowers be any tinier? Ghost flower. I'm not afraid of you. With your ghoulish face and deathly pale petals, your bright red capillaries lure insects down to dusty pollen, which with promises of sweet nectar, which you do not have. Trickster. Creosote. Unloved bush of the desert, sparse and drab, straggly and solitary, you smell like motor oil. Yet, all of a sudden, you burst into yellow blooms and white puffs. For a short while, the desert smiles and snows us into spring. Indigo bush. Shy sister of creosote, next door neighbor on dry slopes, the same scraggy limbs, but nothing else in common. Smooth white branches give rise to piney needle leaves and a fragrant cloud of tiny irises, the blue perfume of the desert. Thank you. I want you to know, too, that she made this stole that I'm wearing today, if you want to look later at it. The art she created, the beauty she shared with the world. And now, I believe it is time for our offertory. Is that right? Hold on. My order of service has disappeared. So, I want to invite you to share what you're able to support our community, the work it does in the world, and the values it shares. And we are honored that you are here with us, and we are also honored that Mackenzie Zahn, granddaughter of Jane Zahn, will be singing this exquisite song for us this morning. Joel will be accompanying her during. As always, whatever you can give is great, please. So I'm going to invite us now into a brief time of silent reflection, a time of quiet that honors all that is in our life, honors the lives and challenges of those we know and those we don't know, all beings, include yourself. And I'm going to invite you just to settle down a little. Put your papers down, perhaps. We'll let that rustle settle in the room too. And softly just breathe. And if you like, your eyelids might feel like closing just a little. You can rest your hands in your lap if you like, or today, if you wish, place one and then the other, both upon your heart. And breathe in some peace, blessing, gratitude, courage, acceptance. Whatever is within you this day in your life, let it flow. It's your wholeness, your holy wholeness. Sacred, entitled to reverence and respect. Grounds, the area around and belonging to a house or other building. Grounded, the work here, grounded in our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. I went back to coastal New England this autumn to preach at a congregation I'd served, and a lunch after the service, I was asked, how can I live in the desert? It's so dry, barren, hot, lifeless. And I smiled, and I said, well, yes, the mountains were rocky and often looked a bit barren, and it did get hot, very hot, but it was drier than Rhode Island. And it was beautiful. All you needed was a willingness to see. The beauty that was there, even the mountains have an austere beauty. The sky dazzles, and the desert horizon is a distant kin of the sea. I shared how Rod had taken Jonathan and me out to see the desert bloom, and with the magic of a cell phone app magnified a flower to show the truth of what seemed to be nothing. And it was glorious, magnificent, awesome. Our eyes grew more able to see as we learned, as we came to understand, and we came to love and delight in the beauty of this land. All of us have a story. Earth Day 20, April 1990, was when I felt called to ministry. The year before, and that year, I had volunteered for leadership activities in my town, at church, kids' schools, and that morning I was invited to stand in the pulpit and share how my small actions kept me going, kept my hope alive in the face of mounting evidence and my own despair. Those actions, small as they were, kept my fear at bay. And together with others acting locally, thinking globally, it had power. The two of the congregations I've served have solar now, and one has a LEED equivalent building. Respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Morning has broken on a new year, 2024. What does respect look like on these grounds? Respect. Brought up Aldo Leopold's Sand Country Almanac, 1948. He asserted that humans have ethical obligations to the land itself, its creatures and plants. He wrote that conservation is a state of harmony, human and land. And he challenged all of us to see land as community, not commodity. UU sources of inspiration include Hebrew and Christian scripture. The biblical origin story says we are part of the earth, created out of earth. Human derives from humus, soil. And the earliest biblical stories are viscerally connected to the land, but later texts separate our spiritual from our incarnational lives. Or as someone said many years ago of her church, those folks are so spiritual, they're no earthly good to anyone. UUs like to be useful. Unitarians, our human capacity to learn and understand is to be used to serve the common good. Universalists affirm the power of love. Everything, everyone has worth and dignity, respect. Transcendentalists tell us we know it when we feel that awe, and science says it changes our brains, opens us up to learn with new eyes. And science, we love science, tells us each and every creature is made from brilliant bits of 13 billion-year-old stardust, alive to see the world and go, wow. Humanists tell us that our purpose here is to create a more just, inclusive, and loving world. Respect. That's an aspect of love, which is why we are here today. That spirit for these grounds brought us together. 88 people's names are on that list out there to conserve and restore diverse life, to build up spaces of refuge for creatures and plants, to build in sustaining structures that support diversity. And the good news, I'm told, is that each of us can do it. So when this celebration ends, it's up to all of us to go and replicate it where we go. Small acts together. Yesterday, I strolled the path, smiling, happy, filled with wonder, curious, plants, lizards, rocks. 35 tons of rocks, 10 of which Dave and Sue brought over here in their truck. And I marveled to Dave about how much work they did carrying those rocks. And he said he loved it. That's what you said to me. Love, he loved it. And I remembered what was told to me that Earth Day 1990. A calling is where your greatest love meets the world's greatest need. And I read those amazing names of those plants. And like Evelyn, I tried to conjure up with my mouth what they would sound like. And I even tried the QR codes. Oh my God. I was joyful, happy with technology. And then I remembered what the Universalists said in 1803. Holiness and true happiness are inseparably connected. Holiness and true happiness, inseparably connected, sacred ground. It is the morning of January 7th, 2024, and what does respect look like on the land here and around belonging to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert? It looks like sacred ground. Thank you.
Start. Okay. If I could be really fast and said what she said.
You know who this is? Dr. Cameron Burrows.
That's me.
One of the instigators and experts.
So thank you all for allowing me to chat with you today. Last time I counted, there are somewhere close to 8.7 million species of plants and animals on this planet. We're one of those, just one. And sometimes we think of ourselves as being more important than all 8.7 million of them, but that's not true. Those other plants and animals are what gives us oxygen. It's what cleans our water. It's what cleans the soil. It's what keeps us from being burdened by mounds and mounds of dead leaves and garbage and everything else. It's animals and plants that are doing that for us. And I think we kind of forget that. There is a tendency for humans to put ourselves above everything else and to say that's something different. And Reverend Barbara talked a little bit about that in terms of some of the scriptures that you hear from other churches where humans go to heaven, but nothing else does. Animals don't go to heaven. The plants don't go to heaven. It's only humans. That's the only ones that get through the doors there. And I think it's important to realize that we are just one of those species. We are not even the most common of those species or the most abundant. We could measure importance by abundance. We're not the most abundant. Bees are more important. Nematodes are more important if we're counting importance based on abundance. Those 8.7 million species are interconnected. They are working together to create a sustainable ecosystem. And at times it feels very much like humans are working against that, where we're trying to create something that's very different from a sustainable ecosystem. And I once listened to this person who lived in a country club here in the valley and said, why would I want to plant native plants? I came here because of the grass and the petunias and the flowers, and why would I want to do that? And it just struck me how far we need to go to get to something that's truly sustainable, that's living in the desert. Reverend Barbara talked about her friend on the East Coast who said, why would you want to live in the desert? Well, California has more biodiversity, and by biodiversity I mean plants and animals that live nowhere else in the world. California has more biodiversity than all of the North America put together, right here, by far. So Connecticut or Rhode Island, wherever you were talking, little tiny bit of biodiversity. Add everything else in North America together, California has more. And then you look at California and say, well, where is the biodiversity in California? And it's pretty evenly spread out, but actually the desert has more plants, species, than all the rest. And you look at that and say, well, what about all this dry, barren ground? And it's because it's not always dry and barren. And when we get different types of rainfall. We get summer rainfall and new plants come up, and then we get winter rainfall and different plants come up, and sometimes we get a lot of rainfall and different plants come up, and those plants foster insects, and those insects foster lizards and other creatures, and because of that variability and that diversity of seasons, that's what gives us the biodiversity that we have in the desert that exceeds any other. And so you often hear people say, well, it's just a desert. Why can't we turn it into a golf course? Why can't we plow it? It's just a desert. And if you measure value by biodiversity, we should be plowing redwood forests over. The desert exceeds redwood forests by an order of magnitude. So that's not the way to measure it. I would argue nobody in this room, nobody in the world would say, yeah, let's plow the redwood forest over. But this desert is as equal or more equal in terms of the values that it has, in terms of the biodiversity it has. So I think the sacred garden, the sacred grounds that Rod and David and Sue and the others have put together is spectacular. It's something that we should all emulate in our own yards, in our own families, and go forth and tell our neighbors that this is the way to become part of the sustainable needs that we have. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Leisha Storga with Desert Straw House Native Plant Nursery, and I am very pleased that a lot of my plants have been used in the sacred grounds. That's how I met a lot of people here, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's such a privilege that the plants that I grew and propagated and my little babies are out here. It makes me feel so proud. So, a few days ago, I was reading an article in the LA Times, an opinion piece, and it struck me because the piece started out and it said, we've become so laser focused on water efficiency that we forgot about biodiversity. And I paused at first. I was like, wait, we need to be thinking about water efficiency. We have no water. But then I thought about it for a second. You know, I'm the one who I get my water bill each month, and I'm obsessively looking at it. I'm doing my year-over-year comparison, making sure that I'm not using more water this year than I used last year. But are we sacrificing biodiversity? Because if we drive around and we look at our landscapes, have they become so generic that they're not providing resources, that they're not offering anything to the wildlife in our area? I'm going to have to put my glasses on because in order to stay 5 minutes, I've got to follow my notes here. So our desert landscapes, they're not offering just so little to our wildlife. And that's something that we really need to be thinking about. What is it that we can do? And our plants are drought, what we consider drought-tolerant plants here in the desert. They come from everywhere but here. But here, meaning here locally, and even regionally. So what do we do about that? How do we fix it? We plant. That's it. It's as simple as that. We plant something, one plant at a time. It's up to each one of us. And I always say, gateway to desert gardening or to native gardening are pollinator and nectar plants. They're pretty, they're simple. HOAs will usually take them. It's a very simple thing to do. Who doesn't like a pretty flowering plant? Who doesn't like bees and butterflies? Hummingbirds? Who does not like a hummingbird? There's something wrong with you if you don't like a hummingbird. So we've got, when we're looking at that, where am I on my slides? Oh, we're just flipping through the slides. Okay. So, sorry, I'm trying to stay on task, so I'm trying to do my notes here. So when you're doing this, you don't need to be intimidated by, I've got to rip everything out, I've got to start all over again, I've got to do all of this. Start one thing at a time. Do your butterfly garden, do this. But if you do wish to rip everything out and start all over again, there's some great rebate programs. with the water districts, and they'll pay for you to do that. Now, as we said, you do your butterfly gardens, you do that kind of thing, it's going to bring in your pollinators. But now you've gotten your toes wet. You've got your birds, your butterflies, your hummingbirds, that kind of thing. So let's start designing an actual wildlife habitat. Very simple one. What's the first plant we want to start with? Our end-all be-all of our native plants. For me, that's the creosote bush. So that's going to, if you want to get your biggest bang for your buck, creosote. That's going to provide you, dense, if you plant it dense, you can have a privacy shade, a privacy hedge. If you put it up against a wall with some uplighting, you can have a statement piece. You can use it for shade for those plants that need a little bit more, need some filtered sun, like our agaves and cacti. Those agaves that we have in our yard that aren't native to our area, that can't stand our summer heat, they need some filtered sun. They can go under your creosote. So that would be my first if I'm starting. I'm going to start with my creosote. Then I'm going to move on over into my brittle bush. Well, so I notice some looks out here when I say creosote, because they're going, hold on. I've driven around. I've seen creosotes. You want me to put that scraggly little thing in my yard? That's not the look that I'm going for. But if you hear me out on this, now that creosote that you've seen driving around in those empty lots or on your hikes in the desert, that plant has gone for weeks, months, a lot of times years with no water. And it's still alive. And it's supporting countless wildlife. So imagine what it can do for you if you give it the teeniest, tiniest bit of love. Imagine what that's going to look like. So in all of these native plants, when you're thinking about them and when I'm mentioning them, don't just disregard them because of what they look out in the wild. Give me that for a second. So now we're going to move on to brittle bush. So brittle bush is that silvery looking one that we see with the very happy daisy-like flowers that shoot up on it. It's going to get, it's usually always a companion plant with the creosote. So we put those two together. That's going to give you nesting for your wildlife. It's going to give you shelter, and it's going to give you a food source. Vital components in a wildlife habitat. So now we move on from that, and because this is my garden, and I like flowers, and I particularly like the color orange, I'm going to choose a desert globe mallow. It's going to be a small shrub, only probably about 3 by 3, but it's going to then have these brilliant stalks that come up from there that are covered in orange flowers, generally orange. A lot of times, shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes the flowers can be cream, or they can be lavender, or they can be a deep rose. Majority of the time, they're orange with our native variety. So that's going to be my next in my variety here. And then if you look, I think it is shown up on the pictures here, but there was a picture of the globe mallow flower. And if you noticed, one of the native bees was shoveling pollen in its mouth. And it is also a favorite with the monarch butterfly if you're trying to attract the monarch butterfly to your yard. That is one of my favorite photos. I cannot get enough of that photo of that bee just shoveling pollen in. All right, so now we would move on to, let's see, what should we choose next? I'm skipping over trees because trees can be really complicated and I don't have that much time. And if you have large shrubs, you don't always have to have trees. So I'm not going to do that many trees in here. So then let's do sculptural plants. So we're talking agaves, cacti, that kind of thing. If we want agaves, we have our native agave, desert agave. And then for cactus, I've recently become quite a fan of cholla. And again, I see you laughing and raising your eyebrow at me. Exactly. Now, we don't want to plant them in our walkways. That would be silly. Don't do that. But if you have ever watched the sunset coming through a cholla, our silver cholla or golden or silver cholla, it is exquisite. It's absolutely exquisite how it glows. And again, some photos, the cactus wren. We've got in one cholla, just one cholla, I've counted 7 cactus wren nests. So again, excellent for a wildlife habitat. Don't put them in your walkway. Use common sense in this. So also our beaver tail, a low ground covering kind of cactus. Everybody knows what the beaver tail looks like. The blue-green pads, the magenta flowers that bloom in the spring. Profuse. So the beaver tails are covered in this. So then we've got that covered. Let's go back to more traditional butterfly garden kind of things, the pollinator nectar plants. A garden isn't complete to me without milkweed, our local Asclepias subulata, which is our local milkweed. It's called rush milkweed or desert milkweed because we like to call everything desert something here. So that is what our monarch caterpillar eats exclusively. The queen caterpillar prefers it. So if you wish to have monarch caterpillars, if you want monarchs to be coming to your yard and reproducing, you have to have a milkweed. Then we're going to move to, design on that. So we've always thought design on milkweeds, design you always say you want to put in 3s. We've thought that was, aesthetically for us, because remember when we are designing, even when we're designing for habitat, because we're selfish creatures, we design for us. We want it to look pretty when we're sitting out there. So we design in 3s. And we've also said, well, you want to have more than one because we're putting this out here for the caterpillar. You don't want them to have eaten it down for a stub and then us to be looking at this stub. So plant more than one. We've recently learned that there's a reason for that. Caterpillars at a certain stage, they move from one plant to another. So in urban settings, you want to have at least 3 milkweed so that they have room to move from plant to plant. And then that increases the viability of the caterpillars. So at least 3 in an urban setting. So now moving, you want to have various flowers going on there. So you want to have your flat flowers, you want to have your tubular flowers, you want to have flowers of different colors and shapes and all of that. One of my favorites is desert marigold. Again, because I like the contrast of the foliage, texture, color, shape, and the daisy-looking yellow shoots that come up. Again, just make you happy. And it blooms pretty much year-round. There's not a time when I have seen that they might bloom a little bit less in the winter, but they are still blooming. And penstemons are always a favorite. The stalks on penstemons, 3 to 5 foot tall, covered in those tubular, just shocking colors, stalks. And the hummingbirds go absolutely insane for them. If you have penstemons, you have hummingbirds. Finally, you want to round it out with ground cover. So I particularly like evening primroses because I like nighttime bloomers because we don't give enough credit to our moths, which we happen to have moths. There are more moths than there are butterflies. And so when you think of the importance of pollinators, just because of the sheer numbers and the way that moths' bodies are shaped, the fuzziness and everything to them, they are, in the scheme of things, possibly a more important pollinator. But we don't plant for them generally because we think of pretty little butterflies. So nighttime bloomers are very important. So evening primrose, which there was a photo of the evening primrose there with the white-lined sphinx moth chewing away happily on it. And there's also datura, which is an exquisite flower, the 4-inch, huge tubular flower with the purple throat. It can get very large at about 3 foot tall, and it can spread 5 to 6 foot wide on there.
I'm sorry to do this, but we have so many people down
I am
at the
just
Labyrinth.
finishing.
Okay.
Just finishing.
Sorry.
I'm finished. So in conclusion, it is that there are so many plants that you can choose from. This is just a small variety of them. So the ones that I've talked about right here are the ones that aren't picky. They'll grow in pretty much every single circumstance that you've got. They have a broad range of appeal. But most importantly, these here provide vital habitat for all of the wildlife that we as humans have taken away. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Will you have that list of plants available for folks afterwards, or somewhere we could do it?
I don't have this list because these are just ones that I just pulled, but I believe all these plants are out there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So I'm going to greatly shorten mine. Mine was going to be, with all you hear of climate change and you hear of basically the planet screwed, how in the world do you maintain hope? And so I'm going to go through that a lot quicker than I had. But here's the real answer, and that is 30 years ago, Jane Goodall sat with a group of teenagers who were discouraged about the predictions for the planet. And she said, well, let's just do something. And they did something. And then she had another group, and she had another group. 30 years later, this is called the Roots and Shoots program. There are 100,000 individuals with 10,000 projects in 80 different countries across the planet. Just start. Just do something. Greta Thunberg, I think, summed it up really well, where she said, how do you have hope? Get started, do something. Hope will arise. And so I was going to go through a whole bunch of examples of zillions of things for programs for the desert tortoises, programs for a million things here in the valley of little teeny things to give you hope. But because of time, I'm going to cut that short. But the point is, as long as everybody just does something, then when you look around and you see everybody else is doing something, that's where hope comes from. Another quote from Jane Goodall of, one thing that gives me hope, I know of no endangered species that doesn't have a group of people trying to save it.
There's so much left for us to learn, and there's so much knowledge in this room. And so when we go forth to the Labyrinth, please share your stories, learn from each other and our wonderful speakers and experts. I think we could use a little stand-up, and we'll sing one verse of Blue Boat Home before we send you forth. Just a little breather.
Still
we're going to transfer our chalice flame to the beautiful chalice she has created for our sacred grounds. We're going to then, please be seated, invite those who need some help to go follow Vicky out the door. The ushers will then invite each row to exit. There's a bathroom down the hall on the left if you need it before we get out to the labyrinth, and we invite you to make this a meditative, contemplative walk. So, please join.
Please read along with me. May the light of truth and its spirit of love guide our actions and help us grow our commitment to learning, understanding, loving, and conserving this beautiful earthly habitat and all her creatures.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.